Hello and welcome to the Tuesday, July 26, 2011 Audit Committee meeting. We'll call the meeting to order. Everybody is here and present. Thank you. We want to start off with approval of the minutes from Tuesday, May 17th, 2011. Anybody have any comments or discussions about the minutes?
Move to approve, Entman.
Second, Rolfing.
We have a motion by Councilor Intiman and seconded by Councilor Rolfing to approve the minutes. Any other comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Thank you very much. We've got, I think, 4 reports to hear, and we're going to get right into them. We'll start off with the street operational audit with Public Works. Rich, is there anything you want to add before they start?
Well, I'll just, Mark, if you want to say anything, but otherwise I can just. Okay. Yeah. We had, this is a good audit. We had about 10 recommendations there that you can find in the report, and we had concurrence on most of the recommendations there. The recommendations start on page 16 of your report. You should have a hard copy there. We looked a lot at the street sweeping, the snow removal, and the pothole repair activity of the street department. As far as the objectives, we looked at is there an internal control structure in place such that we have compliance with laws and policies? Do we have accurate operational information, and do we have effectiveness and efficiency, especially in those areas that we just discussed? And for the most part, we found that the management controls were operating effectively. I would categorize the recommendations as more tweaking the operation. One thing that was very interesting to observe was the efforts at preserving good pavement, which they're using a technique called microsurfacing, and I know they had a press conference, I believe, last week. I don't know if any of our elected officials were able to attend that. It's a very interesting process. It's a promising technique. I think we're into our 4th season now. I think we started that in 2008, putting on a very thin, hard layer of protection on good streets to keep them from getting water penetration, and that seems to be working. Public Works has been very good about using new technology. They're using the Techcrete, which they started last year. The council approved the machine to apply that. There was a $50,000 appropriation in a supplemental appropriation approved by the council so that they can do more of that Techcrete operations to fix potholes in concrete streets. So the response, I believe, starts on page page 20 of your hard copy. You should have a hard copy there. I just incorporated the response from management. The recommendation to install global positioning technology in snow removal vehicles, Public Works agreed that has some promise to it. There's a cost to that, which they go into. It's something they'll consider. That's something a lot of cities in the snow, kind of the snow belt areas of the country have gone to in the last 2 years. I know Buffalo, New York is something that they started this past season where they authorized a GPS device on every piece of snow removal equipment. That allows a citizen at home to log on to the city website, and they can tell immediately where the snow blades are. Oftentimes it's color coded, so you can tell if they put chemical down, or you can tell when the blades are down, and you can tell the actual position of the blades at any moment in real time. So it's useful to the citizens. They like it because they can see what's been plowed and kind of where the plows are. It gives some accountability to management. They can, for example, override the chemical application. If the operator is applying too much chemical, the manager back in the office, they can override that and put down the correct amount of salt or chemical. So it has a lot of promise, but there is a cost. It's about $1,000 approximately per unit that the city would have to purchase, and then there's some operating costs of airtime for the GPS technology. We also recommended that for the street sweepers. A lot of cities have the GPS on their street sweepers as well. So the recommendations were more just to kind of tweak what they're already doing, and We had mostly we had agreement on our recommendations, and where they did agree, they set a target date of when they expect to complete that recommendation. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer, or Mark Cotter or his team would be happy to talk about that.
Deborah.
Thank you. You know, Rich, when I read that the $1,000 cost, and I think earlier in the report you had mentioned the number of machines that the city owns. They would need to buy that 1,000 for, or each of those for. How many is that?
Well, they own 5 and they lease 32. Is that
So,
correct, Galen, for the graders?
So it'd be a total of 32.
Well, then you have your
total of 5.
your contractor equipment.
Okay.
So, Galen, if you want to speak on that.
Galen, Huber Street Fleet Manager. There would be 37 motor graders that we operate, the city, of which 32 we lease. There's 29 contracted motor graders. That's just motor graders. The benefit that Rich was talking about the chemicals would then, we have 45 sanders out there that run one-way plows on them that we probably want to put those on too. We have 8 sweepers out there that we probably want to put those on. And I'm probably just one of the divisions within the city of Sioux Falls that thinks this is probably a really good idea, besides probably police or fire. I hate to speak for them, but I would think they also in other cities have GPS units on, like police vehicles. So if there is an officer needs something, they can look at where the next closest one is and just bring them right in. So I'm guessing that police and fire would probably be interested in finding a system that would work for all of us, that would be compatible, would be the thing that we would need to work with finance purchasing on to do.
Sure, if I may, just one more question. And so maybe through OSEP, it could be phased in, like, I don't know, 20 or 30 at a time or something, you're thinking?
Certainly, you could set a priority on what equipment you believe has the first priority, and just purchase those, and then which equipment would be second or third or fourth down the road, and just start it out that way and phase it in. Certainly, that would be a process. But I, too, looked at Washington, D.C., had it out, and I took a look at theirs over the winter last year, and for them, where they have so many people driving their beltways, what they had is the roads color-coded. You could tell right where their sanders were. You could tell right where the chemicals, the roads that were treated, and you knew which ones to avoid. And so that would be something here, even for us, where there's a lot of people that commute into the city of Sioux Falls and commute out. They could take a look and see where we've been, what streets have had chemical down, which streets have been plowed. They could tell when approximately we're going to be by their house. That's probably the biggest question I have, is when you can be by my house. And that's always hard for us to nail down, because we never know what the weather's going to do and change and how we have to react to it, and whether we're going to be in front of your house in a half an hour or 2 hours. So that's where the GPS with the live time would be very, very good for I think the citizens would really enjoy that, really like that.
It's a question of the council appropriating money and cost benefit. I think the citizens, like you say, would really enjoy that. Figure out what would this cost the city? Is it worth it for that benefit?
The modules we had in this winter that we put on the 4 motor graders, the 2 with snow gates and 2 without, you could get whatever information you want. But one of the things it would update every 2 seconds, so you could see the motor grader going down the road. When the blade was up, the road was red. When the blade was down, the road was green. So I knew when my operators actually had their blades down, or when they were just deadheading to a certain location, just by looking at it on the computer. So that, again, would be something we have to work with IT, because if we have a server out there that's going to open up to the public, we'd have to be able to make sure that it didn't crash. If you have 10,000 citizens all of a sudden want to get on and see when we declared a snow alert, where I'm at.
Councilor Intiman.
Question on that too, Galen, if you might. We own 5. You lease how many?
32.
And the operator-owned units that we get on board is an additional.
Contractors, there's 29.
So in a case where we lease the units, how long is our lease on those units for? Is it a seasonal lease?
Seasonal, yep.
So how do we manage owning GPSs on those, and then how would the requirements be set for the contractor-owned units?
Well, I think what we do, we have cameras right now that we've purchased and put onto our motor graders. Ever since we put back cameras on our motor graders, we haven't backed into any vehicles. We haven't had any accidents in the last 2 years. And what we do is every October we go in and mount those cameras onto our new leased motor graders. I think this would be the same thing. And in around October, the contractors would be required to have these GPS units mounted in the motor graders that they're going to use for snow removal for the city of Sioux Falls.
So more than likely, you would require the owner-operators of the owner-operator units to install those, or would the city own those too, or what?
That's a good question. I'm not sure exactly. We would have to sit down. I think the best thing would be sit down with the contractors and find out what would work well with them. If the city would own them and the city would install them to ensure that they're up and running properly, and then we would just take them out in the spring of the year, like in April when we remove theirs at the same time. It'd be something I think that we need to have some discussion with the contractors on to make sure that what they feel would be the best for them also.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? I think one of the items that we're trying to figure out is just how much money are we talking about, and that's just one of the ideas we're trying to figure out.
The airtime is probably the biggest one. Basically, what you're going to need is like a wireless, almost like a cell phone line for each one of the units, and that would be a monthly fee. That would, if you're looking at every 2 seconds updating that, basically you're online when the machine's up and running. And so I think, Dean, you have looked at somewhat of a cost that I don't know if you can nail that down.
Dean Borkart with Public Works. Prior to being down here in Public Works, I was at Fleet, and we did kind of look through these alternately. And basically, like Rich was saying, it's basically a cell phone. You're going to get a $30 monthly charge. You can negotiate some of those based on quantity, but you're going to ballpark play that a monthly fee annually. So you're basically committing $360 if it's $30 a month for that airtime, to connect it to our network. And then we'd work with our information technologies department to set up a website that could handle, obviously, that type of, the amount of volume you're going to see, hopefully, with the citizens in checking it out. It's going to be increased traffic, obviously, during those peak points. So you're going to have to build it to hold that yet, too. I would guess for an estimation, I would say at least $30 per month per unit on your airtime ballpark is what you'd be looking at. And then to speak to Councilor Endelman's concern, one of the things that we did put in our audit report is that we would have to negotiate with our contractors on the 29 contractor blades, as far as from a standpoint of how that would work. A city-owned asset on a non-city appropriated vehicle, they do not just plow streets for the city of Sioux Falls, obviously. They would be in non-city-owned properties, parking lots, things along that line that still would be tracking. So that would be shown on our website and would be live data at that point unless we turn those units off once they left us. So those are things that we would have to work out and fine-tune along those lines and negotiate with our contractors to make sure that we're not, misrepresenting what they're doing, but yet tracking what they're doing at the same time, because it wouldn't be fair for citizens in this quadrant to have that capability. But since you have a contractor, you wouldn't have that capability in another quadrant of the city yet, too.
There's probably going to be also a management fee for the website that they would make it that available for us to have, like Hydraulic World did for us this year with the snow gates. They provide the website. They gave us passwords. We could log into that, and that was their site. I assume that there would be some type of a management fee that we would have to pay on a monthly basis for that to have people access that.
Well, thank you. I don't want to get too distracted on the GPS, but I think it was good discussion. Maybe it's something further that the council would want to talk about. But I think communicating with the public certainly is a priority on that issue. Any other questions or comments about the street operations audit? Good, very good. Then I think, Rich, you have anything else you want to add in that?
No, I don't.
Okay, I think it was pretty straightforward, pretty good report. Myself, I would take a motion to accept.
And the report, the one you're approving is I incorporated the responses into that hard copy there so that it's all in the audit report. So.
Move approval, Aguilar.
Second, Oppegaard.
We have a motion to approve by Councilor Aguilar and seconded by Member Eppegard. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Thank you, Rich. Move on to the Arena Orpheum Theater contract audit, Rich.
Yeah, we, as you know, pretty much every year in our audit plan we'll have some sort of audit like this where we audit the agreement to manage a public facility. We have a number of public facilities that we hire a company or have an agreement with a nonprofit organization to run the facility for us. So the idea is that you take the contract and then you put down what the key points are and investigate whether the management company is complying with the terms of the agreement. And overall, we found that SMG was managing the arena and the Orpheum in compliance with the management agreement. However, we had some areas of the contract that we didn't see compliance with, and so we had some recommendations in that regard. And we had some opportunities for improvement that was more aimed at how the city did things. But one overarching principle that we saw is that the contracts, if they would spell out when reports are due, for example, if they say, SMG should turn in this report or that report, it'd be helpful when the contract is written if they put down a date. That's always helpful. Sometimes it's not clear, when that report is due, and sometimes the reports are not turned in. Another point we had was under this agreement that if SMG did not break even, they were required to pay back their $50,000 management fee. Now, both the city and SMG, we had an email documentation where they had agreed among themselves that break even, did not mean break even in the sense that maybe you and I would think of that, where expenses equal revenue. Well, they decided that break even would refer to meeting or exceeding the budgeted deficit. So SMG said, we had this email exchange with the city, and we both sides agreed that as long as we met or exceed the budgeted deficits, that we broke even. And our point was that should have been defined in the contract. Our understanding of break even is the dictionary definition or the accounting definition. So in our opinion, that $50,000 should have been remitted to the city because they did not. They were in the red for the year 2010. Another problem is just in general with many agreements like this is the monitoring by the city could be improved. What we suggested that maybe you have one person in the city, a contract compliance specialist, who would handle these major contracts, and that would be the point of contact with SMG or Global or the Pavilion, et cetera. And then they could be tasked with monitoring when the reports are due and making sure that everything is being monitored. So that was one of our opportunities for improvement. We looked at the public facility management surcharge. On page 12, we first mentioned that. That goes back to a city ordinance that's been around for, I would say it goes back to at least the 1980s, if not earlier. It's been changed over the years. It used to be just sort of a flat fee. And back when I started with the city, it applied to the arena and the old Coliseum downtown. And the idea was that you would put a fee on people's tickets, and that money would be used to help defray the cost of operating the facility. That's changed over the years. They have a tier system now where the amount that's paid depends on the ticket price. And what we found was that public facility maintenance surcharge, it's not being collected on the comp tickets. In other words, the free tickets are given out. In fact, we looked at the month of June of 2010, and we had, I believe we had about 38% of the tickets in the month of June, there were 4 events that they were comp tickets, and they don't collect the maintenance surcharge on that tickets because they're basically free. They're handed out. So we're feeling like, well, the city's losing some money on that. In 2010, the arena had budgeted for estimated revenue from that maintenance surcharge approximately $250,000. $258,000 was what they anticipated getting in 2010, and they actually collected about $222,000. So it's quite a bit of money. Now, the argument that you'll see, and Terry Torkelson is here from SMG, and he might want to talk about that maintenance surcharge. It's something that promoters don't like to see. It's probably something that needs to be addressed, especially if the voters were to approve an event center in the election, and something we might want to bring up with fiscal committee next year. Just kind of revisiting that whole ordinance of what is the purpose of this maintenance surcharge? What about comp tickets? And then there's an exemption. It does not apply to the Orpheum Theater. It does not apply to the Washington Pavilion. It's public facilities that are 2,500 seats or greater. So that would not include the pavilion. It would not include the Orpheum. It's probably something that needs to be looked at again. So if there's anything else, we had a number of findings there. I don't want to go through each one, but if there's something in particular that you want us to talk about, I could address that, or Mike Cooper or Terry from SMG would be happy to discuss that. So.
Councilor Entman.
I do have a question on this, and Terry, maybe you can just answer it. On this specific thing on the surcharge. And it says here, school, district, county, nonprofit, educational, and religious institutions are exempt from that surcharge. Does that also mean, like, if there's a major state tournament that's held here, that those tickets would be exempt from the ticket surcharge?
No. They've been kind of grandfathered in, that there's a rate that they get. But yeah, it's still collected. Their tickets are cheap, so they fall within one of the lower price ranges. But yes, they are still.
There's still a charge of some sort on those.
They're still assessed that, and they are assessed that in Rapid City as well. So, and like Rich was saying, when Tim came in, he and I had a long conversation about this when he did the audit. The comp ticket side, the band will not pay for that, so that will become a promoter expense if you tack on, say, $2 to every ticket. Well, some of those shows are giving away, the band requires that they get 200 tickets, and the agent gets so many, and the recording label gets so many, and they give those out to, whether it be a fan club, or some of them do know people in Sioux Falls. That would be a cost absorbed by the promoter then. And you're seeing more and more across the country, promoters are wanting to split that facility fee with buildings because buildings control it. In our case, we don't. So there was an earlier attempt to allow that to stay with the building, that money, but I think it was due to state law that it was not allowed to have happen. It was something that was going to be brought before the council, which would mean that $250,000 would stay with the building. So had we got that money, the building would truly break even.
May I? To the first point that Rich made concerning the emails back and forth concerning the definition of what's in the red or what's in the black or whatever, and maybe between the two of you, you can answer that. Is that a shortfall in the way the city wrote the contract, or evidently it sounds like the agreement was understood, that what you said was understood to be the correct way. So the question that I have is that something that the city wrote the contract wrong in, that we need to take and double check that, Rich, when those contracts
our opinion would be that probably should have been defined better, because the way we would see break even in the dictionary definition, revenues equals expenses, but that was apparently not the understanding of SMG and the city attorney's office. So SMG was saying, well, this is what we agreed to, but so we just think the definition could have been more clear. I just think if a layperson looks at that, or a city council member, they would say, "Oh, break even means break even." It doesn't mean you met your budgeted
There were
deficit.
two sets of emails. There was one when the contract was being negotiated between Joe Romano, our senior regional vice president, and Karen Leonard in the attorney's office, where they had discussed that during the contract negotiations, that would be what the definition meant. And then Kelly Zamora, our finance director, and I met with the city earlier this year, and it came up in one of the conversations that we just wanted to clarify that, yes, in fact, this is the case. So there were actually two sets of emails that it pertained to. But over the years, being part of the arena team, break even in our vernacular has always meant that subsidy was seen as a revenue. It was always booked as a revenue as part of, so that's why it was defined as break even.
That subsidy, is that set at the beginning of the contract term? You know, that's a fixed dollar amount, or how is that negotiated?
It's part of the budgetary process. So, it kind of changes from year to year where that's going to be at based on projections, what the team contracts are, things like that.
Okay, thank you.
If I could add, Terry, if I could add just a question. I think in the past I've understood it that your management group, as well as others, have template kind of contracts that pretty much the city accepts, modifies in their way that they feel fit, fill in the blanks.
Correct.
And so the initial beginning was from your contract.
Well, I really can't speak to how it was done, but it's not, this contract is not like any other contract we have. So it's different than most of the ones we have.
Okay, well, I was just trying to get to the source of where do we start? How do we make the next one better? And do we start with our own department, or do we start with you, or just keep track of this?
I guess we would probably defer to, the city to decide,
Okay.
to determine what's the best course of action there. With multiple management companies here in town, it might be best to write one, to have the city write one, but have it reviewed. Because there are things, like Rich said, there's no dates on when our reports are due, so, we
Seems definitions and due dates would help everybody, auditors included, help you as a manager knowing
Absolutely.
when you're expected to turn in a report.
And it would help Mike Cooper as well, so he would know when things were to be expected, so.
By the way, this agreement expires December of 2012.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Councilor Intiman.
I think, Councilor Jameson, this is one of those issues I think that's just raised to the surface again after we reviewed the convention center contract, that there's some of the compliance things we talked about, whether you call it a contract compliance or a monitoring person to monitor those contracts. And I think when we look at the contracts that we have coming forward in the city, that this is one of those things that I think when it comes to management contracts, we need to be a little bit more aware of. And it's no fault of anybody's. It's just kind of, I guess, kind of an out of sight, out of mind kind of thing. And I think we just need to be more in tune to that, or the city should be to those contracts. Rich, I think that was brought up previously too.
Yeah, and you'll have a report, probably our next audit committee. We'll look at those 5 or 6 big contracts. We'll just look at things like, okay, were the reports turned in, were the audited financial statements turned in, that sort of thing, and we'll have a report for the council on. But
Thank you.
it's something that, I think it's probably time that, maybe we have that person designated somewhere. It could be a finance person, it could be a city employee, who is that point of contact and that monitor. It makes the manager's job, I think, a little easier if they just have one person at the city they work with, even though that person may not know everything. That would be their one person, and that they deal with. So,
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the group on the audit? I would maybe add just a couple of comments. There seem to be a lot of little issues in this audit. You made a comment in here about having the representative from the city be not involved in the selection of the actual.
yeah, we put that as an opportunity to improve. We thought it might be a conflict of interest. Might be better if that liaison person or contact person maybe would not be on the selection committee. But
If I could, I'd like to hear from Mike Cooper just a little bit on the summary of his take on just an overall view of how this audit went. We've all known Mike for a long time, and Mike, any thoughts here on this audit? Just your opinion.
Sure. Mike Cooper, Planning and Building Services. And by the way, I think our sound system is kind of breaking up today, but yeah, I believe that there's obviously some opportunities for improvement in the future as we go through renewals or renegotiation of these kind of contracts. And one of the challenges is that in many cases, at least what I've experienced recently, is that typically the author of the actual contract, which typically is in the city attorney's office, that staff person may not be around at the time that these audits are conducted. And so sometimes there is questions about what is the interpretation, the correct interpretation. But I'm not trying to throw any blame on the attorney's office because they do a fantastic job of working with us. But when we initially had our discussion, I came out and said, I'm the city liaison for this contract as well as for the SMG contract, or I should say Global Spectrum. And I would be the first one to say that I probably don't spend as much time addressing the details as maybe I should be. That's part of my management style, and that also the other things that I have responsibility for, and that maybe there should be more of a centralized process or looking at how the process works citywide. I do have another staff person now that is working with me. Russ Sorensen is kind of the detail person in our office, and so has been helping, work through some of these issues, as well as working with the monthly Arena Convention board meetings and the Orpheum board meetings that we also help assist with. But I think as we move forward, we're going to have an opportunity not only to look at how the contracts are administered, but also, as you mentioned, where does the template from these contracts come from, or where should it come from? So I think there's going to be room for improvement all across the board. But I'm not going to give you a direct answer as far as some of the recommendations at the end of the report, as far as my involvement or somebody like me involving with the next go-round of selection. Yeah, I could see where that would be a potential conflict of interest because of the day-to-day involvement that I have with the management groups. But on the other hand, I can also tell you pretty directly some of the pros and cons of each one. So it's kind of a mixed opinion that I would have at this point of how that would potentially move forward. And, typically those are done by committee as well. And I know now with some of the changes that the council is looking at, that those contracts will probably be coming to the city council anyway for final approval. So I don't know if I gave you a direct answer or not, but
No, I think
I don't have any major issues with the recommendation.
that's what I was
And
really
I understand
after.
that there's always going to be room for improvement. So
I'd point out an example is Public Works. When they have construction projects, they always assign a project manager from the engineer's office to kind of very closely monitor that contract to completion. Even when we do hire an engineering firm to also be a project manager, we always have a person assigned who is very knowledgeable and will spend a lot of time monitoring that contract. So that's an example. I think we're at that point probably with the city for these type of contracts.
And one of the interesting day-to-day things that goes on in our world with these contracts is that depending on the situation, there could be the city attorney's office involved, there could be the planning department, it could be engineering, it could be central services through Eric Jelkin if there's an issue with the building facility. So, even though we have kind of a recommendation of one centralized entity, there are going to be situations throughout the year that other city departments or other city staff could be brought in depending on the question or the situation. And the finance office is another key player. So we have interdepartmental coordination meetings all the time depending on the situation that comes up.
If I would add, just in the end, I think that this will be one of those audits that the council will be looking for a kind of a follow-up,
Right.
to see how things have moved along, and it's just a high-profile agreement. But go ahead, Councilor Rolfing. Did you have something?
How are we going to arrange to make sure that we get that follow-up then?
Rich you usually schedule that, don't you, Rich?
we have a
Yeah,
follow-up
we do that.
protocol that we follow, especially if there's been an agreement that we follow up on that. Obviously, if they don't agree, they don't agree.
So will
but-
that be like in a year or something like
Yeah,
that?
yeah, we have kind of a schedule that we follow, that
Okay.
we
And
we
then
look
you'll
at.
report
and we
back.
report back. We have
Good.
an annual report to the council on
Right.
all the recommendations.
Because obviously we'll be going through one more year of the current agreement
Yeah.
again, so,
Right.
Okay, Mike, thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Well, I just want to make sure I restate this right, that what we're doing today is that we're accepting these reports to be sent on to the full council. We're not giving the final approval of the information in it. We're just accepting them, moving them to be sent on to the full council, just to be clear. So here we are again. Is there any other comments or questions about the arena audit? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
So moved, Rolfing.
Second, Aguilar.
We have a motion from Councilor Rolfing, seconded by Councilor Aguilar, to approve the Arena Orpheum Theater contract audit. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Very good, thank you. Next, we'll move on to the police cash handling audit. Rich?
Okay. Pretty much every year we schedule this type of audit. We look at cash, just frankly, because cash is something that's very vulnerable. We want to make sure we have good internal controls. And sometimes we come up with some associated issues when we look at the cash. One of the issues we came up had to do with the sales tax on this audit. And we had a number of recommendations here, and I believe we had concurrence with all of the recommendations, so which is doesn't happen very often. So when it does, we kind of like that. We don't expect it, but we did have concurrence on that. Some of the sales tax issues were we were collecting sales tax in cases where under state law, and we confirmed this with Department of Revenue, we were not required to or not expected to collect sales tax. So we had that issue to correct. We had another issue where the sales tax, as you recall, as a council member, had been raised to a full 6%. And in one case, they were still collecting that 5.92%. Not a whole lot of money, but we still something we need to correct. We had some instances where the finance department was making corrections to the deposits or the receipts and was not informing the department that they had done so. So the communication piece could be improved, and I think we have agreement on that. Overall, we had the controls were pretty good, and they were following the procedures. We did notice that fund that the detectives have that they use for their alcohol stings. There was a couple instances where they had borrowed from the state money. It wasn't that they didn't pay it back. It's just that they had run short on cash, so they had borrowed from the state money that they had control of. And we just said, maybe you should just increase your little pot of money so you don't have to borrow. And we also said maybe instead of doing the manual ledger sheets, you have an Excel spreadsheet or computerize that. So we had agreement on that. So I would categorize this as an audit where we were just trying to clean up some things, just making sure things are right. And we did suggest that perhaps the finance department could review other places in the city where we collect money, make sure we have, if it's supposed to be taxable, the tax is being collected at the 6%, and if it's not supposed to be collected, that the departments were not collecting the sales tax. So just kind of little housekeeping issues there. And if there's any questions, Assistant Chief Patty Lyon is here, and I can try and answer any questions as well. So.
Any questions of Rick or of Patty? Yeah, this seems to be the real purpose of an audit is to just clean up some of these little procedural issues that come up. I do have one question, if I could ask, because I can't help myself.
I would expect nothing less.
And it's
Patty
a little
Lyon with the police department.
It's a little lighthearted because I was reading the report and I thought, well, where does the drugs and booze go after they're purchased from? I mean, where do they wind up? Not that I'm looking for any, but I'm just curious.
Well, the drugs would definitely be in our evidence, and as well as the alcohol, because that would be part of, if we're building a case, let's say a criminal case against somebody, then we would have to keep it as evidence. But I'm not sure. I can check with Captain Vandekamp on that for sure. But I know that we used to in the past keep
Just-
that as evidence.
I thought of it, and I thought of all this sitting around someplace in a room, probably as a.
Well, we
as-
used to. And then I know that at one point we started doing beverage tubes where we would just get a sample and then we just dispose of it, get rid of it, dump it. And it's been a while since I've handled that specifically myself, so I'd have to find out.
I'm just
It doesn't show up on the surplus property sale, I don't believe. so.
No.
imagine.
And it's not going anywhere that it's not supposed to go. So
I'm just kind of a curious cat like that, but I think it might come up later. It's probably just a good idea for you to know exactly where it is, and if it's
and you
sitting-
know, I'm assuming that Captain Vandekamp would be better able to
Okay.
respond to that. I just don't deal with that that closely.
And the other one was, how much money are we actually spending on alcohol? Not so much drugs, because that's just out of our hands, but on those stings, how much money are we really spending on? Are we talking $1,000 a year? Are we talking 500?
I think there is maybe like $2,500 or $3,000 that was kind of allocated towards that, but I don't know if they ever spend that much because I think it depends on it's not just alcohol. They use it for like if they have a CI on like some burglary information, they might provide
Other things.
for undercover things. So it's kind of it's all been kind of thrown together into one line item on our budget, and to break it down, I couldn't say for sure, but I know that we the young people that we use to go into the stores to make those alcohol purchases, I believe we do give them a little cash for their services. So it's not very much.
Okay, very good. Sorry, I was just a little curious. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Rich, anything else to add on this?
No, it just went well, and we had a number of recommendations, and we had concurrence with them, so we're pleased with that. We thank the police department for their cooperation on this.
Okay, very good. I would entertain a motion on this item as well.
So moved, Applegard.
Second, Rolfing.
We have a motion made by Member Applegard and seconded by Councilor Rolfing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Very good. Thank you very much. Move on to the CAFR review. Rich?
Yeah, this is similar to what we've done the last 2 years. And if you've read our previous reports and if you listened to the briefings from our city finance director, you'll be aware that our financial strength is very, very good. We compare very favorably to in this case, the 12 benchmark cities, which, if you want to know which ones they are, they're on page 17 on that appendix. We selected those cities because they had a lot of similar characteristics to Sioux Falls. I think we had looked at 8 different categories, average age, average income, that sort of thing, the population, et cetera. And they're all cities within a day's drive of Sioux Falls. But we looked at solvency, both the long-term and the short-term. For example, a short-term solvency, you look at liquidity. If you take your cash and your cash equivalents and you look at your short-term liabilities like accounts payable, we found we have excellent short-term solvency, and also our long-term solvency was strong. We're in good financial position to weather emergencies. We have a very high unreserved fund balance in our general fund, which I think the council is aware of, that they have a target to finish the year at 25%, and the last 5 years I think we finished around 30 to 35%. And pretty much every measure that we looked at, we're better than the average of the 12 benchmark cities. So I think that speaks well of the financial policies that have been adopted by the council and the management of the administration to ensure that we are conservative with our finances and that we're good stewards of the taxpayers' dollars. We looked at city employees per capita. That was less than the average of the 12 comparison cities, and it stayed pretty steady in the last 5 years. Now, long-term debt had increased. We the city had borrowed quite a bit, I think, starting in 2007 for infrastructure, for sanitary sewer. And then for Lewis and Clark, we borrowed $70 million. So our debt per capita had gone up, but it was still in the moderate category according to Standard & Poor's. And it was still below the average of those 12 benchmark cities. So pretty much every measure that we looked at there, the city's doing well. And one thing we did look at, too, is in some cases we adjusted the dollars for inflation. We used a cost index that the government comes up with I think they call it the implicit price deflator, so that we could trend the numbers and take into account inflation. So overall, the city's in good shape, and that's about it. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. Tracy Turback from the Finance Department is here as well. So.
Any questions of Rich or staff of the report? It's a pretty good story. I mean, it's a story that, the audit is good, but the other information just that's in the CAFRs, it's a great story about our city.
Yeah.
Auditing it, I guess, validates that comparing it to other cities, it validates that we're good.
That they're in good shape, yes.
I had just one notice that we're the only city in South Dakota, and I know that's based on the size, and that these comparable cities were based on the size, population. So that
the 8 different characteristics. We didn't put Rapid City. I guess we could have, but I think those 12 cities are very comparable when you look at those 8 characteristics. And
I think they were. Did anybody have any problem with those other cities?
Not at all. Not at all.
Comparison. Okay. Well,
comparison.
You're not moving to Duluth, Minnesota? Or Sioux City? Very good. Anything else? Tracy or Scott, did you guys have anything you wanted to add as long as you're here? Okay, very good. I would entertain a motion on this report as well.
So move, Entenmann. Move to approve. Or move on to the council. Recommend to the council.
Need a second.
Second, Aguilar.
Thank you very much. We have a motion from Councilor Entenmann, seconded by Councilor Aguilar, to move this on to the full council. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Very good. Thank you. Next, we'll move on to a discussion on the fraud, waste, and abuse hotline protocol.
I don't expect we'll maybe take action today, but I thought we should have a discussion on maybe establishing a protocol. We don't get a lot of calls on the hotline, as if you read our report that we produced this year. It isn't like we're getting 10 calls a week or something like that, but it's probably time to have some sort of protocol for handling the calls. In the past, it's just sort of been on an ad hoc basis, so get a call and we'll investigate, and we let leadership know, or we'll have some sort of executive session or something like that. But as I thought about this, I remembered our very first audit report we did back in 2007. We did a fraud risk assessment, and one of the things we had recommended back then was to get the hotline, which the city council appropriated the money for. But another thing we thought was important was to have a fraud policy citywide. That did not happen. The administration at that time did not want to take that up. It's probably time to revisit that issue now, 4 years later. I included in your little package today a sample fraud policy, and that's from the ACFE, Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, and it's a very good policy. And then there's an actual real-life policy there. That's from the South Dakota Board of Regents. That's about a 3-pager. And the question, I guess, is, we probably need to have a fraud policy before we have a protocol, and have a decision of, okay, who's responsible for what. And what I like about that sample policy, that ACF one, ACFE one, is they have a matrix in the back of it there, which is pretty handy to visualize. Okay, who's responsible for what? Who's responsible for internal controls to prevent fraud? Who's responsible for monitoring those internal controls? Who's responsible for this or that? And because when you have a fraud case, and I have had the occasion 10 years ago to do that when I was in finance as an internal auditor. We had a fraud case involving a city employee. Typically, you get the police department involved. You might get HR involved. You might get the city attorney involved. It's a multi-departmental process once you get to the point where you think you have an actual fraud occurring. And back then, we didn't have a policy either, but we just had discussion with all the parties, and we gathered enough evidence to the point where the police department could take action from there. And it resulted in a prosecution and a recovery of money to the city for that fraud case. But I guess the question I'd have for the council is, is this something that we would suggest as an ordinance? We have various ways to do it. If you have an executive order, that'd be something that comes through the administration. I don't know if that's appropriate or not. I guess I'm just opening it up for discussion for the audit committee members. So.
I would weigh in with, I think it would make sense for us to actually make sure we do the creative protocol and get maybe one of the committees to look at this on the council, review some proposals from Rich, get the city attorney's office involved, and outline a procedure. Yes, we've experienced difficulty moving through items that come in on the fraud hotline. How do we manage it? How do we do it? What is the first step? What is the second step? Those kinds of things. So I think it would make sense for us to get this in written form. So I would, we're fortunate enough to have the city council chair on our committee, and perhaps she would be willing to
I would suggest that it goes to the fiscal committee.
Very good. So the council, Rich, will I think,
start with the fiscal committee, and
with your involvement, we'll get that through the fiscal and analyze it. And
yeah, I think it's something that needs to be discussed and get the various departments involved and draft a good policy. So
I think it would be fair if I could say it, it'd be a good idea to get the city attorney on board sooner than later, so they're not surprised, and we have a chance to get rolling right into it versus
because there's various issues. Obviously, there's HR issues, there's legal issues,
That's right.
and at the point where you get to the point where you decide to prosecute, then you get the detectives involved, the police department. So
I don't know how formally to do it, but if we would like to have Rich work with the city council to make sure that this item doesn't get dropped and put on the agenda of the fiscal and work through the drafts, Rich, we'll put you in charge if that's... Rich, okay, I think we're good on that one. Do we need to do anything else? I'm sorry, are there any other questions, comments? Anybody? Okay. Okay. Rich, do we need to do anything?
No, I don't think.
Good.
I'll just take that for action, and I'll talk
Okay.
to the fiscal committee chair and get the city attorney and kind of get the ball rolling on that.
Councilor Brown is the fiscal chair.
Okay.
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 Now we'll move on to our request for proposals on external audit services. Rich?
Yes, we worked with city purchasing to get the RFPs this summer, and we received two proposals. One is from McGladdery, and one is from our past auditor, Ide Bailey. And I have copies of those here. Now, I guess I emailed you before the meeting and said something to think about. How do we want to make a decision on this? I think it's fair to whatever firm that we decide to go with that we make a decision sooner than later. August would be, sometime in August would probably be fair to the firm. They have to do some planning. There's audit work that can be done before the end of the year. There's risk assessments and that sort of thing. So it's a question of is this something that we want to pass these out and then come back for a special meeting and make a decision, or do we want to delegate this to like a subgroup of 3 or 4 committee members and they make the decision? And Scott Rust is here from finance to talk about how you handle an RFP, how you can score it. Or so, Scott, if you want to.
Scott Rust, City Finance. Hey, Rich is right. We did receive 2 good proposals, one from McGladdery, one from Ide Bailey. there's different ways we can do this. Since we only received 2 proposals, we can certainly just bring both of them in and have them give a presentation. Or certainly, we can just score them and rank them the highest, and then, base it off of that score, and then they're considered our auditor. I prefer bringing them in and talking with the groups. I guess it would be my opinion. I think that you guys need to talk about who you'd like to have on that selection committee. Somewhere between 4 to 6 is a good number to have on that selection committee. I do have the costs. I purposely left them out for obvious reasons and negotiations and so forth. So, if whatever route you decide to go, we can share the costs when we get into that committee meeting, and we can talk about that and score those at that time.
I would maybe start off the discussion. Is there anybody who's excited about reviewing these proposals that would love to participate in this?
I actually look forward to staff recommendations.
Okay, well then, seeing nobody jumping forward, I'm not sure that.
Counselor?
Oh, Counselor Entman, go ahead.
I think we have some members, lay members on this in our group, I believe, that are probably a little bit more versed in it, might be able to help us out a little bit more than myself.
So,
and of course with purchasing and city finance and with Rich here, so.
I would be willing to mediate the process. Councilor Jameson's been involved with a few here as of late. I encourage the council members and committee members to be part of this process. It's a good process. You'll see how transparent the process is and how fair it is. So I encourage people to raise the hand and say I'd volunteer. I'll administer the process. I'll set up the meeting rooms and everything there and provide every little bit of information you need. Really all we're asking for is a couple hours of your time.
I'll volunteer.
Councilor Aguilar.
I'll participate also.
Very nice.
He's a tough cookie, by the way.
Good.
Scott is.
Scott does make it simple. It's really easy. Is 2 enough? We could do the old military way, I guess, of having volunteers. But I do appreciate the volunteer time that our other staff, other members give. So I hate to encumber them. So I would volunteer as well if 3 would be enough.
Yeah, that'd be fine. I would like to have
Rich.
We could possibly even have someone from finance come in too.
Okay. Yes.
So that would give us a fourth.
Do you know anybody in finance?
Yeah, I know a few.
Deborah's.
Deborah. There we go.
Deborah.
We're doing good then.
Okay.
Jeez, who didn't raise their hand? Maybe that's what we should. Antonin.
Rich,
Jason.
if you would send me a list, I'll go ahead and take care of getting that all arranged.
Okay.
I would, like Rich said, I think time is of the essence. We need to make a decision and possibly get an agreement in place, early September. Make a decision by August, agreement early September.
Yeah, I think it's
because there
fair
is work
to
that
fair
can
to
be
the
done
company,
towards the end of the year.
Yeah.
Is anybody in the committee opposed to that process and how we're moving forward? Okay.
So it would be one meeting, roughly approximately an hour apiece, and we could score them from there. Like I said, I've got the score sheets all ready to go, and I can provide you copies of the RFPs here yet today.
Councilor Rolfing, did you have something?
With August being full, of course, we could meet on that Tuesday, on Tuesday anytime during August to get this taken care of, couldn't we? Our regular August time.
It really depends on the availability of the audit groups. When they're going to be, most of the time, if you tell them you want them to come in, they're going to come in.
Oh, I meant to vote.
Oh, to vote, sure.
And I believe, I have a note, Deborah, that I think we have to, whoever we go with, this agreement, we adopt by city council resolution. Is that correct? I mean, so when it's all said and done, we've selected somebody and we have an agreement that would go through an evening meeting, be attached to a resolution, and be voted on by the full council to accept whichever firm.
So we as a group are going to have a special meeting to approve it, and
no,
then
not
or
necessarily.
we're going to allow you guys to where the resolution that we're doing right now, or motion, is going to allow you guys to take it directly to council? Yes. Okay.
Is
All
that
right.
okay with the
We just
group?
want to make sure that the committee is okay with that process, so they won't,
Yeah.
the members, the subcommittee will weigh in and make the decision, and with the help of staff, it'll, go ahead.
Sorry, I'll talk in the microphone. And the subcommittee will update the entire audit committee with the selection and their choice, and probably the reasons for it. The criteria is pretty, I did this once with the fraud hotline. It's very clearly stated. And so we'll just send that information on to you for the reason selecting the one over the other.
Right, that's fine.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Scott.
You bet, thank you.
Appreciate that. Okay, we have that down. Now we move into open discussion. Rich, did you have any items that you needed to?
We ordered these. I had the city clerks order these from GFOA. They have a whole series of these elected officials guide to, fill in the blank. So I gave the elected officials on the committee a copy. I mean, if one of the citizen members wants one, I guess I could give one to you. But I have enough basically for the city council members, and it's just real simple. It has a question and then about a 1 or 2 paragraph answer. It's kind of like one of those everything you wanted to know about auditing, but we're afraid to ask as an elected official. So it's just a little help. I'll probably put one in the mailbox of the other council members that aren't on the committee, and just a little resource. In other words, when an auditor says a material weakness, well, that sounds bad. What does that mean? Or what is a single audit? It explains all that stuff.
How come mine says auditing for dummies?
Special
I wasn't
one
going to
for
say
you.
that.
Special one.
Oh, special one, okay.
Any other open discussion items? Deborah Owen, did you have something you wanted to?
Yes, pardon me. I'm sorry. I was doing additional work. I did have one question. With the current Eid Bailey contract, we have it set for a certain amount, and then when Eid Bailey incurs additional charges or needs to charge us more, they're supposed to let us know before those are incurred. And I got a bill. I think both Sue and Greg know, but I had a bill for an additional $800 to the audit committee, and it's for professional services in terms of a presentation to council. And usually when we get these, they come through those extra charges. We communicated either to Rich or to the audit chair, and we haven't had that. So we've done this dance once before, and so I just wanted to make sure as we get these extra bills, hearing from the audit committee, that those are cleared through that committee if we have an extra charge, in part because we only have what is allocated in that line item, GL number, D amount for the contract. So in this one, it's 800, so it's clearly above and beyond, and should have probably been notified the committee first.
It had to do with an IRS audit of the HR department, I believe, wasn't that?
It says a conference.
And then they gave a presentation to the council on the results of that IRS audit, I believe. Yeah.
So this one is a conference call with the city to draft talking points for council presentation and draft memo, presentation to city council on process and results and findings of the IRS exam for 2007 and 2008 employment of the 1099 issues. And my concern isn't so much what the bill is for, it's just that when we get these extra charges that are incurred to the audit committee, that those should be cleared. In my opinion, the contract says those should be cleared prior to those charges being incurred. And this was not followed. And so I'm just looking for some direction from the audit committee. We tried to kind of work through this privately the first time, and this is coming back. So what is the wishes of the audit committee on this item?
It sounds like it's realistic charges to me in answer to an IRS audit and informing the council, which was not part of the contract. Rich, was that right?
No, it's not part of the external audit. It was a case the IRS spent off and on about 2 years looking at 1099 issues and also the issue of whether a person was a contractor or a city employee. And we ended up paying, I don't know how much it cost us. It wasn't a whole lot of money, but we did have to pay something. And I believe Eid Bailey helped the city a little bit with during the course of the audit. and then they gave a presentation to the city council this spring on the aftermath of the audit. So
Right.
it didn't really relate specifically to the external audit, but that's we're responsible for paying that. We have a line item in our audit committee budget for paying Ide Bailey.
What I
so.
hear Deborah saying is that it's a procedural thing, where before they retained Ide Bailey to help them with a 1099 audit, it should have come through this committee. Am I correct?
Yes, thank you. That is the issue I'd like the committee to address. It's not the bill so much as is the procedure of making sure that we have notice so that we have money to pay those bills down the road.
Well, and it seems to me that at this point, I mean, we cannot deny the charges because they did the work, but it's important that that be conveyed to Ide Bailey or whoever our auditor is going forward, that if they're contacted for work above and beyond the single audit that they're retained for, that we need to move through that in a procedural manner.
So that there's no surprises. And this is
Right.
the perfect time when we're doing the RFP process and we're talking to both of the firms that hopefully that would be very clear that that would be the procedure the audit committee would want to see. So,
Scott, what about it? What do you think?
Well, obviously, if it is written in the contract that they are to contact you prior to that, we should, obviously hold them to the contract. However, if this is above and beyond the contract and we contacted them for an opinion, so to say, we should obviously, we know that the charge is coming. So we should.
Is there a way that we can make sure that, understanding that this specific issue is addressed in the contract?
Oh, absolutely.
In your negotiation?
Absolutely, yes. When we negotiate the contract, we'll be working with Deborah's group here to make sure that we get these issues resolved.
Well, and I think, too, it's who initiates the contact. Ide Bailey didn't approach the city and say, hey, do you want help with your 1099s? The city approached Ide Bailey, and so the awareness of following a procedure called for lies within the department in the city that's seeking their services. They are the ones that need to make sure the procedure's followed, not Ide Bailey.
Good point.
It seems to me that this is more of a city finance department issue. It has nothing to do with the audit of the city. It's a completely separate issue. It's dealing with the procedure for issuing 1099s to independent contractors and whether or not that was appropriate and if those people should have potentially been city employees, not independent contractors. I understand this bill needs a vehicle to get paid, but I'm not sure that it should be part of this committee. Isn't it more of a finance department bill rather than the audit committee?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I can't comment to that. You're putting me on the spot there right now, but I can't comment to it because I wasn't involved with that, with asking for that additional work. But it's something that we could definitely look at, and work with the city clerk's office on any additional bills or whatever. So.
Thank you. And again, the concern is more just the procedure down the road as we have these additional charges incurred, that the audit committee, if it's a true audit committee bill, you want to make sure that the audit committee is aware of that.
Absolutely.
in those
Well, and
fees.
I envision the new contract, having an hourly rate established. So, we're going to know. If we've asked for work, if the audit committee's asked for additional work, we're going to have an idea that, what it's going to cost us per hour to do the work. So.
Okay, so we have that wrapped up. Going forward, we'll know how to handle it. But this one, we're pretty well clear on that we just need to pay it. And we'll take it out of finances budget or something. Okay.
HRs.
HR. Okay.
Not finance. HR's budget.
Any other open discussion items? Rich, you're good? Nothing else? Okay. If we don't have anything else, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Aguilar.
Second, Oppegard.
We have a motion from Councilor Aguilar, seconded by Member Appegard to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Very good. Thank you. We are adjourned.